everybody, welcome back to another Sewcialites 3 video. Today we're going to sew up block number 20. It's called the Gazebo block by Doug Lico. This is a beginner level block. I'm sewing both the 9-inch and the 6-inch block. Today off camera I'll sew my 9-inch block since it's a little bit more difficult to follow with the colors that I'm using. We'll sew the 6-inch block together on camera. I've picked out my fabrics to coordinate with the layout here to make it easy to follow. If your fabric colors are different, like mine are for my 9-inch, let me show you what I did to keep track of everything. On the second page of the instructions, I wrote the first letter of the color name. So P for pink, green, orange, red, yellow. Yellow is in the center. When I laid out my 6-inch block, I have those same colors, so I was able to check them off. I made a note that instead of yellow in the center, I was using a multi-print on white. For the 9-inch, I have pink and I have red, and then I made notes for everything else. Instead of green, I have a pink dot. Instead of orange, I have tan, and for the center, instead of yellow, I have beige. That's going to help me keep everything straight. This block is pretty straightforward. It's nothing we haven't done before. We're going to be making half square triangles, sewing rectangles together, and sewing our rows. If you've been following along, you know I've had stuff piled on the featherweight. I still have stuff piled on the featherweight, and this week I have stuff piled up next to the Juki. So we're going to sew on the Baby Lock Ballad this week. Let's go ahead and start our block. This block is really straightforward. I feel like we can lay everything out ahead of time and almost sew everything at once. The first thing we're going to do is make our half square triangles. If you want to sew lines, you can draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of fabric A. I don't have diagonal seam tape on my baby lock, but these are pretty small. I'm going to try to eyeball it and sew corner to corner. We'll see how that goes. So I'm going to lay these out. That way they're ready to take over to the machine. Right sides together, I've got a solid here. It really doesn't matter. Those are all laid out. And then our second step is to do our rectangles with our background. We'll just lay these out together. And then everything is ready to go over to the sewing machine and start sewing our block. This is the Baby Lock Ballad. It's a great sewing and quilting machine. It has a lot of great stitches if you like to do your own quilting, a nice big throat space. I have it set up for a straight stitch with a stitch length of 2. That's what we're going to use today. A fun feature of this machine is you have 2 foot pedals. You have the main foot pedal and the sidecar. The main foot pedal, to make the machine go, you push up top, and I've programmed the back push to be a thread cutter. And then the sidecar I have programmed to lift the presser foot. This machine does not have a laser. Some computerized machines have a laser so you can get that laser line and know right where you're stitching. I'm just going to do my best to eyeball it. The 6-inch block has pretty small pieces. I can line it up, and I can also lift and look. There's a little line right here. And kind of visualize where it goes as I'm sewing to watch the center line. Let's go ahead and sew. We're going to do all of these right down the center. I think I did relatively okay with that. One of these I know is crooked. I think it's this one. It has a little bit of a curve to it, but it'll be fine. I'm going to go ahead and separate these. We do need to trim, but since I'm sitting at the sewing machine, I'm going to sew the rectangles. To change the foot on this machine, you just pull it down. And put a foot on with that 1/4-inch guide. Clips into place, and now I'm ready to sew my rectangles. You've got your background and your print. You should have one in each of the 4 colors. You could also make this block with just a background and one color, however you want that to look. Let's go ahead and put the foot down. I'm using the little sidecar pedal I showed you, and we're going to sew all 4 of these. I've got all of those sewn. We're going to go ahead and trim these and separate these. And then your half square triangles, we need to trim a 1/4 inch away from the center line. Since I'm sewing the smaller one, I can actually cut with scissors. I'm comfortable enough with that just to trim. And remember, you can always flip and check your half square triangles before you trim. So if you want, especially if you're using a print, which I probably should have done with that one. I could have seen which part of the print I was cutting off, but that's okay. But you could look at it and say, hey, this one looks good. And then let's do the other side. Maybe one side's better than the other. I think this side is better, so I'm going to trim off this side. I need to trim all 4 and go to the iron. I'd press to the dark And I would press these to the dark, and then we'll lay out our block. Right here we have the measurements to double check our half square triangles. Mine should measure 2.5 inches square. Let's take one and measure it. It's a little crooked. There's no extra to trim. I can see one side is crooked, but I'm okay with that. Something always comes out crooked or short. 2.5, 2.5, that one looks good. Let's look at this one. That one looks really good. Looks like my orange one is the worst of the bunch. They're all really good, except for some reason the orange one came out a little wonky, so I'll have to be careful with that. And then if you want to measure these, you have measurements right here as well. I'm doing the 6 inch. Let's check. 2.5. These are all going to be close to 2.5. I'm comfortable not measuring these. Let's lay out our block. I've got my picture over there off camera. We're going to start with our center square, which is yellow on the diagram. I'm going to use this multi-print. Here they have the orange. Your print goes toward the center. Over on this side is the red. Down here is the green, which means the pink is over here. And then let's look at our half square triangles. They show the orange down here. Up here is pink. Here we have our green. In the bottom corner, we've got red. We can sew the row, 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 and then sew our rows together. For this row, it shows pressing toward the center, toward the rectangle. For the center, away from the square, toward the rectangle, and the bottom, toward the rectangle. So when you're doing these rows, if you press everything toward the rectangles, you'll be good. And then when you put your rows together, has you pressing up, so again, toward a rectangle, and then down toward the rectangle. I'm going to sew these two, and these two, and then I'll trim the threads between. So these, and these. I'll go to the iron, I'll press everything, and then I'll come back and sew this row and this row. It's pretty basic, and we're on block 20. I'm going to go ahead and show all of the sewing and not stop between each of the stops. I'm going to give this a final press. We'll take it over to the table, we'll measure it, and I'm also going to go sew my 9-inch block. We'll measure that and see how that one turns out. I can already tell this is a little off right here. Here's the orange, the one that I said was a little crooked. Here's the finished block. Definitely a little crooked, and I think it's going to be a little short. Let's have a look. Yep, it's a little short. No surprise there. Fairly straight here, and then you can see short. And the orange is the worst part. I can actually even it out a little bit. This is easy to see that it's visually short. I'm not worried about that. I don't need to leave a note. I'll definitely see that when I go to put it in the quilt. I'm going to go around and trim away the fuzzies. Now this is nice and neat, ready to set aside. Let's get the 9-inch block. Here's my 9-inch block. A little bit more difficult managing the colors on this one. I think this one's going to be a little bit small too. Let's have a look. It's a little bit small. Here's the 9.5. You can see we're short here and we're short over there. That's okay. I've been very consistent throughout this so long, which is important because if one is short and all the rest are large, you're going to have trouble getting that one to fit. But all of mine have been consistently short. I think a couple have been really close to exact size. Everything will go together nicely at the end. I'm going to go around and finish trimming the fuzzies. We are all done with block number 20 for Sewcialites 3. I'll be back next week for block 21. Only 5 more to go, and then we'll work on the filler blocks and we'll assemble both of these quilts. This quilt with the 9-inch block I'm going to assemble per the layout given in the Sewcialites Sew Along. For my smaller blocks, I think I'm going to do something a little bit different. Make sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, click the bell for notifications so you don't miss any of these videos, and I'll be back next week with the next block. See you next time, everybody!